Hello, pattern readers. I'm so excited to finally be talking about a Wheel of Time episode with you. This is my reaction to and breakdown of episode 101, Leavetaking. I'm going to keep the first part of this video spoiler-free for the books, as well as any future episodes, so feel free to watch on, unless you haven't seen episode 1, in which case, what are you doing here? But assuming you have watched, let's dive in. The episode begins, of course, with a 1-minute scene of Moiraine with voiceover preparing for her journey to find the 20-year-old dragon reborn. This clip had been released ahead of the episode, so I've broken it down before. But I wanted to add that while before I had questioned the exact meaning of one line, now it seems clear that when Moiraine says the Aes Sedai do not know if the dragon has been reborn as a girl or a boy, it means that the gender of the soul that has been reincarnated need not remain constant. It's an interesting choice, and it has some potential positives, but it does raise some questions for me that I would love to see more of how the show handles. Overall, I like the expediency of this scene and the reversal of the expectation of this shot. We would think that Moiraine is undressing here, but instead there is business-like determination of getting dressed in a practical travel outfit. The next scene shows what appears to be two men running from a group of women on horses, all dressed in red. The women are Aes Sedai of the Red Aja, though we don't know anything about them yet. It turns out there is only one man, and he is a man who can channel the one power. He only imagines the second man, a sign that the corruption on the power, which only affects men, is already impacting his mind. The lead Red Sister, who we will come to know as Liandrin Sedai, is suitably chilling. The way she views a man touching the power as filthy tells us a lot about her. We also don't know at this point exactly what she's doing to him when he starts screaming. As she alludes to, the intention is to give him what she calls a gift, what is actually to cut off his ability to touch the one power. But there's a lot we still don't know about how that's going to be portrayed in the show. Moiraine and her warder Lan overhear this, but their only concern is that he is not the one that they are seeking. Lan seems to doubt this, but Moiraine is sure, and she doesn't need to explain this. Lan just accepts it. This next shot is gorgeous. What appears to be overgrown ruins of a once great city, a remnant of the breaking perhaps, or, as we will come to learn about, perhaps the destroyed city of Manetheren. From there we cut to the two rivers, where Moiraine and Lan are heading. We first are introduced to Nynaeve, who, as the wisdom of two rivers, is welcoming Egwene to the women's circle. Nynaeve displays tenderness in her words to Egwene, but fierceness in the way she pushes Egwene off the cliff into the river as part of the ritual. Egwene at first struggles, but when she surrenders to the current, she gains control. There is symbolism there. This brief scene of Rand and his father Tam coming down from the mountain where they live establishes the long-time connection between Rand and Egwene, and a hint of unease about the wolves and something pushing them down from the mountains. The scenes of the village, both inside and outside the inn, feel immersive. With Rand and Mat and Perrin, we immediately get the banter of old friends, and it seems Mat is not so lucky with his money. Also, we hear the first mention of war in neighboring Geldon. I loved the warmth of the reaction from the women when Egwene walks into the inn, dressed and hair braided, triumphant. Rand seems disappointed that she doesn't look to him, and he continues to brood over it. This next scene of Moiraine and Lan's arrival at the inn I've also broken down in full before. I'll just add that there's a lot happening here, and quickly. There's definitely an expediency to the way these scenes are flowing so far. The next scene that follows is a short one between Rand, Perrin, and Nynaeve. Rand is already showing great caution around an Aes Sedai, while Perrin seems mainly curious. Nynaeve goes even further than Rand, saying the village will be better off when Moiraine is gone. And then she gives Perrin a nudge to go back to his wife Layla at the forge. In my previous video all about Perrin and Layla, I talked about how the sense I got from their scene is that the distance between them and her isolation stems from her sadness, and that it might have been caused by a miscarriage. That is speculative, and there is one other theory that I do want to mention later in the episode. My heart truly broke for Mat in this next scene. To see his mother as a drunk, his father a philanderer, and the way his first thought is always of his younger sisters, whom he treats with pure kindness. His mother's words about how she thinks he will be just like his father are brutal. I'll have more to say on this later in my spoiler discussion. The first part of the Rand and Egwene scene had two key beats for me. First, Egwene is starting to tell Rand what has been on her mind in regards to Nynaeve, and then he cuts her off with a kiss. That's definitely not romantic, and it shows a way in which they are out of sync with each other. On the other hand, when he offers her the strawberry, we really do feel their chemistry. There is far more romantic and sexual tension on the screen than these two had in the book. The tub scene with Moiraine and Lan, I totally was not expecting that, at least not in episode 1. It does certainly show the level of comfort they have with each other after 20 years of knowing exactly how the other one is feeling at all times through the bond. The thing I loved was the way that it set up an expectation for new audience and then subverted it. Two attractive people get into a bath together, you'd expect there to be sexual tension. And when Lan says it could be warmer, that even sounds like a come on. Moiraine even gives him a rather arch look, but then instead she uses the power to heat the bathwater, and they both relax for a moment. When we cut back to Egwene and Rand, the conflict between them is becoming a lot clearer. We can see that they might want different things. Rand seems to want to marry Egwene and raise a family, while Egwene is thinking of her abilities and what else life might have to offer, starting with the possibility of becoming a wisdom like Nynaeve. The biggest issue for me, though, was that Rand didn't stick around to hear her out or discuss. After Rand is gone, Egwene seems to hear something. In the soundtrack, there's a whistling, and we cut to a dark figure on a horse outside the inn. It is what we will come to learn is a fade. Whistling carries into the next scene, which is the next morning, with the peddler Fain laughing and driving his wagon into the village. We quickly find out that Rand didn't stick around in the morning to see Egwene either, but went back up mountain to his farm. Then we have this scene between Fain and Mat. The scene is also to emphasize Mat's poverty, but we also learn he has stolen a bracelet from a woman named Danya that he was playing dice with the night before. The purpose for Mat seems to be to get lanterns for Bel Tine to give to his sisters, so there's nothing truly nefarious here, but it does show the lengths he will go to in his desperation. In this brief scene between Lan and Moiraine, where they start to look around the village, we get two key pieces of information. One, that Lan thinks one of the eyeless, a Fade, is already here, which tells us he has some ability to sense them. And we have another example of Lan and Moiraine having a conversation where they don't really need to say much. We've had a few examples now of one of them asking a question and then basically getting an answer without the other one really having to use words. This next Rand and Egwene scene is my favorite of the two of them so far. First of all, the setting is gorgeous, but more importantly, we see Rand talking about the future he envisions, and Egwene verging on tears. She starts to tell him she is going to apprentice with Nynaeve, but this time he cuts her off to say he knows, and this time he shows understanding and forgiveness. They embrace, and there is sweetness and sadness in what appears to be a kind of goodbye. The scene between Nynaeve and Moiraine is one of my favorites in the episode. We learn a bit about Nynaeve's history, and it seems clear that Moiraine is trying to ascertain it for the purpose of figuring out Nynaeve's age and if she could be a candidate for the Dragon Reborn. Assuming she is 25 or 26, as the scene suggests, Moiraine should be able to rule her out because she's looking for someone closer to 20. Nynaeve's memory of the wisdom who raised her explains a lot about why she distrusts Aes Sedai and her anger at the White Tower. Whether the Aes Sedai really did turn away her mentor because of her clothes is unknown. Moiraine doesn't comment on it, but Nynaeve believes it, and her anger is fierce. And she says one of the most important things that we can know about her, which is that her job is to protect the town, and that she will do it no matter what that entails. The other interesting detail here is that Nynaeve seems to know that listening to the wind, which her mentor could do, means channeling the One Power, which suggests that she could be aware of her own ability. I was surprised to see Mat being so intuitive in this scene with Rand and Perrin. He seems to know nearly exactly what has happened with Rand and Egwene, even though Rand says nothing. Meanwhile, Egwene and Nynaeve listen to the wind together and hear something wrong that Nynaeve has never heard before. It would seem they are sensing the shadow spawn, as Egwene seemed to do the night before as well. Lan finds a grouping of dead sheep, a gruesome and eerie sight, and their arrangement seems deliberate. Moiraine watches Rand and Mat and Perrin through her window in the inn, while Perrin and Rand offer Mat some money for Bel Tine, which he tries to refuse, but he eventually accepts their kindness. Rand then heads back up the mountain, and we see Tam and Rand performing the Bel Tine ritual of lighting a lantern to help guide the spirit of their loved one back. In this case, Rand's mother, who died when he was a young child. Tam's speech, interspersed with shots of Two Rivers people lighting lanterns and setting them on the river, was really beautiful. We learn that in this world there is reincarnation, but people cannot remember their past lives. Tam speaks simply and eloquently about the reasons he sees for living life again and trying to do a little better next time. It was a really lovely way to introduce the audience to the concept of the Wheel of Time. Moiraine and Egwene catch sight of each other during the lantern lighting, making us wonder if Moiraine now has her sights set on Egwene as a likely candidate. But there is no time for talking because the party begins with dancing and music on the green. Though it's not a party for Moiraine and Lan. Lan reveals there is a fade with dozens of Trollocs, and Moiraine does not know which one of the young people is the one she seeks. Perrin and Layla seem much happier as they dance. Mat smiles as he dances with his little sisters, but Egwene is dancing with a young man who is abruptly killed, and the Trollocs appear in their midst. From there on, it's chaos. Perrin and Layla usher people into the forge. Mat tries desperately to find his sisters. Nynaeve and Egwene try to help the wounded. And things are not quiet up mountain on the Althor farm either. A Trolloc bursts through their door, and both Rand and Tam have to fight. We see Tam's heron-marked sword, and know that he knows how to use it. Rand eventually kills it after it has injured Tam. Also noteworthy is that Tam knows the creature is called a Trolloc, which other characters like Nynaeve and Egwene had not. Cutting back to Nynaeve, there were two things I really loved. First, we see that at least some Trollocs at times run on all fours. That was really effective for me, a nice detail that emphasized the variety in these creatures and the animalistic qualities. And then this pure scream that Nynaeve lets out. She can't kill this creature with only a knife, but she certainly won't let it break her will. She will fight no matter what, and she and Egwene attack with everything they have. But it is Moiraine using the power that saves them. Seeing the way Moiraine and Lan move around each other in a kind of dance as they fight was actually breathtaking. You've got to love Dae's Conger shouting back at a Trolloc as well before a group of women surround it and knock it to the ground with whatever tools they can find. For me, the episode did a wonderful job personifying the fight through the various characters that we are now familiar with. Mat finding his sisters and telling them to hide in a tree, Perrin and Layla fighting together despite the distance between them, Egwene's panic when Nynaeve is dragged off by her hair, which is a bit odd, by the way, that they didn't just kill her right there on the spot. There is, meanwhile, a bit of beauty amidst the destruction in the way that Moiraine moves and the lightning she calls from the sky. But the most heartbreaking moment is with Perrin, who has lost himself in the intense focus of killing a Trolloc and swings his axe into his wife. This was the most gruesome and hard-to-watch moment of the entire episode, and his pain at her death was really unbearable. I'll have a bit more to say on this at the end. Hope seems lost as Moiraine is injured and Lan says there are too many. But Moiraine finds a reserve and unleashes power that she has held back until now. She pulls and hurls stones from the wine spring in itself until half of it collapses and she along with it. She has destroyed the last of the Trollocs, but Lan must shield her with his own body. As morning arrives, so does Rand, with an injured Tam. He takes in the death and destruction which is everywhere. Egwene must tell him Nynaeve is gone and cannot help Tam. The characters gather, Mat realizing that Layla is dead as well. Moiraine goes right to healing Tam, though her hand shakes as she does it. Despite this, Rand is more suspicious of her than grateful. He confronts her with the fact of her arrival right before the Trollocs. But Moiraine cuts right to the point. It isn't a coincidence. The rest of this episode happens in a cascade. Moiraine explains that both she and the Shadow Spawn are there because one of the four, Egwene, Rand, Perrin, and Mat, is the Dragon Reborn. One who can stand against the Dark One, who is already waking. Mat at least doesn't believe her, but there's no time. They can see another army approaching. This time at least 300 Trollocs per Lan, and Moiraine says they all must leave. Rand protests, but Moiraine quickly pushes back. The Shadow Spawn are after these four, and if they stay in the Two Rivers, that is where they will come. The only way to protect the village is for these four to leave it behind. She doesn't wait for an answer. Their only chance is to reach the White Tower, and they must leave now. They all mount their horses and follow with no more words. Nothing but tears from Mat's sisters, a nod from Tam, and Moiraine's iconic voiceover, drawn straight from the beginning of Chapter 1 of The Eye of the World. Before I get into any book spoilers, I did want to comment on the pacing of the episode. That really seems to be the most common critique I've seen, and it's the one real concern I had with this episode as well. It actually doesn't bother me for most of the episode. It does feel fast, but for me it does work up until the end of the episode. I do think the episode would have benefited from being supersized, but I still support the decision to end the episode with them leaving the two rivers, and there was just a lot that had to happen before that could occur. So what I do wish is that they had included a little more conversation after Moiraine tells them they have to leave because the Trollocs are pursuing them. No one questions how she knows that it is the four of them that the Trollocs are after. No one nearby questions it either. They just watch them leave. But the pacing does get better in the next two episodes. From here on out, I want to do a deep dive into some aspects of the episode, especially those that involve book-to-screen spoilers. So I am going to be including spoilers for Book 1, The Eye of the World. If you don't want spoilers for that, haven't read, then make sure to subscribe and come back for my breakdowns of episodes 2 and 3. I am curious about what they were showing Liandrin doing to the man who could channel at the beginning. The assumption is that she was gentling him. We do know that men were supposed to be taken to the White Tower and sit a trial before gentling should be done to them. We also know that the Reds did not always do this. For instance, we know that gentling was performed on Tom's nephew Owen without a trial. Some people even speculated that this man could turn out to be Owen, which would be interesting. But either way, I hope we get some more clarity on this by the end of the season. I was surprised that we didn't see this scene of Egwene in the ritual pool that we saw in the first trailer. It's possible that it will be shown in flashback, however, as they seem to be doing a kind of prologue in each episode, and perhaps it will be included in one of those. There are also some still images included in the bonus features for the episode, which suggest some other cuts, though I have some hope for the Rand and Tam scene to be shown in flashback. The imagery of Egwene in the river is a perfect depiction of what it looks like to learn to control Saidar through surrender, so it is nice foreshadowing for Egwene's ability to channel. I was surprised to find that my favorite book-to-screen change so far was the addition to Mat's backstory and the change to his family. I've talked before about how I didn't like Mat until the third book, although he then becomes one of my favorites. Well, he's already one of my favorites in the show from the way he cares for his sisters and his friends. The way that his mother speaks to him is really gut-wrenching. It's not so much adding layers to his character as it is making layers that are there for him in the book a lot more accessible, because Mat in the early books isn't fully fleshed out and developed yet. So it's great that they're bringing some of that forward and allowing us to see it. I think it's brilliant the way they had Fain's whistling start over the shot of the Fade entering the village and then continue it when we see Fain entering the next day. A nice, subtle enough clue for those who don't yet know that he is a dark friend. In the Moiraine and Nynaeve scene, I wanted to comment more on Nynaeve saying the wisdom who raised her went to the White Tower at age 13 because she knew she could listen to the wind. This implies that Nynaeve knows that listening to the wind is channeling, which means she should be aware of her own ability to channel. This would certainly be a change from the books, where it's actually harder for Nynaeve to accept this truth about herself. I think this still clearly leaves room for her to hate the Aes Sedai, even if she doesn't fear channeling itself. What would be interesting is what this might mean for her block. I hope she still ends up having a block, because I think that is an essential aspect of her arc. But of course, there probably are some Wilders who are aware they can channel and still have blocks. The scene of Lan finding the dead sheep in the shape of the dragon's fang suggests to me that it was Fain who directed this. It doesn't seem like something a Myrddraal would do, but Fain would probably enjoy it as a way of alarming the villagers. For the Tam and Rand scene, I wanted to discuss some later book series foreshadowing, so go ahead and skip to this timestamp if you don't want spoilers through Book 12, The Gathering Storm. There's so much foreshadowing in this little speech. Rand eventually being able to remember his past life, and especially Rand's revelation about why it is worth living again, to love and try again and do a little bit better each time. And we have the words, even death over a shot of Mat, who will die and live again when Ravine kills him and Rand balefires Ravine. During the Trolloc attack, we see a shot of Fain watching and then rather calmly walking away behind his wagon. He doesn't look frightened. It's very quick, easy enough for new viewers to miss in the commotion, but it's a pretty clear clue that he is a dark friend. Now, I want to talk about the theory that has been popular in the past few days, that Layla Ibarra might also be a dark friend. The theory seems to rest mainly on this shot, where Perrin swings his axe and hits her, and we can see that her hammer was already raised. The idea is that perhaps her hammer was raised to swing at Perrin, and that his Ta'Viran instincts kicked in, and that is why he swung his axe when he did. First of all, I think it's tenuous. Is it possible? Sure. But I think they'd have to really come back and show us more to make that clear, because I think she also could have just been raising her hammer to hit the Trolloc on the ground and help Perrin instead. From what I've seen of the character, what I got from her is she's sad. I think she's had a loss and it's made her withdraw. But she also still finds some joy and tries to connect with her husband. I think she's a badass who works a forge and fights really effectively against the Trollocs and tries to protect others. I think some people might be jumping on this theory because it makes them feel a little bit better about what happens to her. To me, it's a tragic accident, and it would still be, no matter what. Perrin is clearly lost in a rage when he is killing that Trolloc, and I think he is acting on instinct. He senses movement, his mind is focused on danger, and he just reacts. So I think it's better to just own the fact that this change was added to the show to heighten Perrin's fear of the violence in his own nature and make that accessible to the audience, and maybe even to draw a connection between Perrin and Lews Therin Telamon in the minds of the audience. But making her a dark friend would actually undercut those purposes, which would actually sort of make it a less justifiable fridging in my mind. I have to believe that Rafe knew what he was doing when he chose this path, and that the implications of this choice will continue to be handled with care going forward. Brandon Sanderson spoke about how he actually pushed back on this idea pretty strongly and suggested that Rafe have Perrin accidentally kill Master Luhan instead. So Rafe had other options, but he still chose to go with this more difficult to land option. And for whatever it's worth, Brandon did say that he was actually really impressed with the way that it was executed, despite his reservations. A little more in regards to the Dark Friend theory, Rafe was actually asked about this when he went on the Ringerverse podcast. And although he didn't give an outright answer, when he was asked about the Dark Friend theory in regards to Perrin and Layla, he seemed to immediately negative it. Although when he was asked about Layla having her hammer raised, he did say that people were picking up on things that were worth noticing. Kind of sounds like Aes Sedai answers to me. There's also one other little relevant scene that's in episode 3, still open to interpretation. I will talk about that when I break down that episode. Last thing I want to say on the episode is that it was an interesting choice to have Rand be the one questioning Moiraine about why she arrived just before the Trollocs did. But it does fit in with something Moiraine says at the end of The Eye of the World about how Rand was always the one to resist her the most, and how that should have been a clue to her that he was the Dragon Reborn. Overall, I did find this episode a very solid beginning that suffered a little bit at the end from pacing. And I would say that the book to screen changes overall really do enhance the characters and make them more accessible to a viewing audience. What were your thoughts on episode 1? Favorite moments? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you will subscribe. My episode 2 breakdown will be coming to you soon. And until next time, keep those loins girded, my friends.